Today's episode is brought to you by the Positively Productive Toolkit, a collection of workbooks that guide you through self-discovery and self-awareness. These self-guided workbooks, which include links to assessments, can be completed in minutes. Request this free resource and others at the positivelyproductive.com/resources page.
The thing is that there's no magic potion, spell, pill that's going to help you get to the point where you accept the fact that somebody else needs to be able to have impact and direction in your life. But once you get there, because of the level of things that you've gone through in your life, once you get there, it becomes a very calming place.
You're listening to the Positively Living podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zawrotny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a productivity coach certified in positive psychology and stress management. Join me as we explore ways to live a more proactive, positive life with episodes on productivity, self-awareness, mindset, entrepreneur life, habits and systems, simplicity, fun, and more. I understand overwhelm personally as a multi-passionate entrepreneur, wife and mom to kids and cats, and as a caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. Welcome to the Positively Living podcast. I'm your host, Lisa, and in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month, I'm revisiting a powerful and deeply needed conversation, one that feels more relevant than ever, about men's mental health. This episode originally aired in 2021, but I wanted to bring it back because the conversation around men's emotional well-being has only become more urgent. As a wife and mother of sons and someone who's now certified in mental health first aid, I'm more committed than ever to elevating this discussion. I've seen firsthand how cultural expectations and outdated ideas about masculinity can create barriers for men who need support. And lately, it feels like those old patterns are resurfacing. I want to release the pressure to stay strong, stoic, and silent for everyone. I want to encourage asking for help and ensure the stories surrounding the need for help stay realistic and kind. In this episode, my guest, Tim Beisiegel, shares his personal experiences with the image of masculinity that often keeps men from sharing their feelings or asking for help. His plea to all men is to acknowledge their trauma and allow themselves to receive care, and that doing so is not a weakness, but one of the most courageous things a person can do. On a personal note, this topic hits really close to home for me. I've watched my husband, an incredible, loving, caring, talented, intelligent man, navigate trauma and grief so deeply alongside our whole family, except he's had to battle the stigma that tells men that they must carry it alone. And now, as I raise my sons, I dream of a world where seeking mental health support isn't questioned, it's expected. It's time we not only support men in counseling and therapy, but actively encourage it. My hope is that this conversation with Tim will continue to be part of that ongoing shift toward compassion, understanding, and healing. Let's listen in. Welcome, Tim Beisiegel, to the Positively Living podcast. I am so grateful that you are here today to have a very important conversation.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'd love it if you'd start by sharing a bit about who you are, who you help, what you do, really what lights you up.
So I'm a married man. I've been married for, I always have to do the math on this. And 23 years. There we go. So I've been married for 23 years. I've got 3 children, a 22-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 14-year-old. What lights me up is my family. I'll be honest with you. I'm very much a family man. I enjoy my family. I enjoy my kids. They're far too much like me. That's probably a problem for my wife more than anyone. I have a tendency to have a satirically dark sense of humor, and that has definitely spread down to my children, which my wife absolutely adores. And I say that with my fingers crossed. But I enjoy doing things with my family. I enjoy being with my family. I enjoy my children's sense of humor, and I take that all very dearly. And I think some of that is growing up, I didn't have much of a sense of family. And so marrying into my wife's family, who I saw as this white picket fence family, which was the complete opposite of mine at the time, was like stepping into a foreign nation and not knowing what to do. But I very much grew accustomed to it and grew into it over the years. My wife is a very nurturing and encouraging person. And so anything that I've, over the years where I've ever said, I think I'd like to do this thing. My wife's like, yay, she's my biggest cheerleader. And I so whatever I've wanted to aspire to try to do to, she's been right there for me. When I thought I wanted to be a DJ, she was, yay, let's do that. When I wanted to get more serious and get back into the family business with designing and logos and things like that, she was like, yay, let's do that. And even when it's come to podcasting and doing podcasting, which has become a great passion of mine, she has been extremely supportive with the yays, let's do that. And so it's made it very easy for this to become, especially over the last couple of years, my place of sanity. This has been my escape to go and talk to other people. And because I'm a very social person, right up until the point I'm not. And I could become an introvert really very quickly.
That sounds like my husband.
Yeah, it's like extrovert, 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 and introvert. But I found that rather over the last couple of years that this allowed me to have the social connection to people that I wasn't able to get any other way because of the pandemic, because of quarantine and lockdown, because of my daughter's health and the health situations that surrounded that with her illness, and because she's an autoimmune child. And during COVID, we kind of had to shut our whole family down. And so it was kind of nice having this outlet. And this is, one of those things that really, I did it almost on a whim. And then the more I did it, the more I went, oh yeah, this is me. I love this. This is great. How can I do more?
Mm. And that's a big part of how we connected. Your wife's name is?
My wife's name is Shayna.
Shayna, shout out to Shayna. Thank you for being so supportive, because all these yeses and all these yays have led us here to this conversation. And Tim, as I was telling you before we hit record, and I feel like I want to incorporate it into our conversation, we've just had quite a time, especially with my son during this pandemic. We've had some struggles prior to that as a family that have really taken their toll on my husband. And to be able to talk about mental health and really bring it into a narrative that is a given, is understood and supported, especially for men, is near and dear to my heart. So I'm so grateful that we managed to connect in this way and we can start having this conversation. So would you please share a bit about what brought you to the point where you said, I want to start talking about ending the stigma of mental health for men, and posting something that caught my eye? Would you lead us up to that point, please?
Sure. I got to build you a little bit of a clock to tell you the time here. So be patient with me. It's not just one thing that makes somebody realize that there's a need for access to mental health. Typically, it's, especially for men, I find that it's a lifelong struggle. It's a lifelong avoidance of access to those things because the world around us tells us that we don't need those things. The world around us tells us to suck it up. You're a man, move forward. So even though in many ways I should have been in counseling when I was a teenager, I was going through a lot of things with the divorce of my parents at a very young age. I had separation issues from my natural father. I had separation issues from my brothers and sisters. I had all these things that really started to chip away and affect my personality. There was a lot of other issues that all led into that feeling of kind of being alone on an island with just my mom and my dad. My mom remarried when I was 10. And, it's funny. I used to have a blog back when I thought blogs were cool. And they still are. It's just, it wasn't for me. I'm not a writer. But anyway, I wrote a blog and I wrote a post about, because after years and years, I'd gotten back in touch with my siblings. Actually, I say years and years, it was 30 years. I had last seen my oldest sister when I was 5 years old. I reconnected with her when I was 35. And that brought this whole swell of emotions back to the surface. You go through life and you push things down and you push things down and you push things down and you think that you're moving forward and you're doing fine. But there's occurrences over the span of your lifetime that affect your mental health, and they pop up so quickly and so fast that you sometimes don't know how to handle them or what to do with them. And being a social system where you feel like you're not allowed to handle these things and address these things. You feel like, okay, I just gotta put that back in the bag, and we're gonna carry that around in the backpack with me the rest of my days. But I wrote this blog post about the issues that I had. My wife basically gave me an ultimatum. She says, "Look, either you're gonna go talk to a doctor, or you need to write this out. You need to talk to somebody some way to get this off your chest." And I'm like, "Fine, whatever. I'll sit down. I'll write it out." And I wrote this blog post about the relationship with my father, and about the relationship with my stepfather, who adopted me when I was 13, and how that all went down with my natural father. And there was a whole lot more emotional toil and struggle that came from that transition because of the way that my natural father handled it. He didn't know how old I was. I was his child at 13 years of age. He thought I was 9. That was very problematic for me at 13, because the problem was is I held this man up in such high esteem, and such in a position that he did not deserve. But I glorified him for all these years. Fast forward a few years till about 19 years old, I reached back out to him because I still had his phone number. I wanted to get in touch with my siblings, and he told me no, that I wasn't allowed. I was no longer a member of that family.
Mm.
Again, that opened up some wounds, and I closed those back down. In my 30s, I had a lot of health struggles. I had a heart issue, and I had to learn again how to deal with life and a change of pace and a change of lifestyle. But I didn't talk to anybody about the emotional and mental struggles that I was going through, because I went from working 60 plus hours a week at a very well paying job to sitting on my chair in the living room. I couldn't walk from one side of the house to the other without being absolutely just exhausted because of the heart issues I was having. And so I had to learn again how to handle the social stigma of being a stay at home dad,
Mm.
because I had family members, even though they did not intend to, kind of like, "Oh, isn't that your wife's job to stay home? Isn't that?" And although they didn't intend to, it chips away at your psyche. It chips away at this image of masculinity that you've built up into your head, and you think that I have to be these things because this is what the social norms are around me. I'm not providing for my family. Clearly, I'm not a good husband. I'm not a good father. I'm not, doing all these other things. So clearly, there's an issue with me. And so I took that very personally because, again, my family is where my life is at. That's the center of my world. And so, my wife and I had to have a lot of talks, and it got to a point where, I'd been doing it for 10 years, and I decided to stay home. My oldest son had some emotional issues his junior year in high school. And so we homeschooled him for a while. And I stood back and I looked and said, well, if I had not been a stay-at-home father, what would have happened with my son?
Mm.
Would I have been able to be there for him? So that was the kind of like the affirmation that I needed for a while to keep myself going. Fast forward a few years to 2019. This is very much the Cliff Notes version of the story. In 2019, my daughter was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is an autoimmune disease that affects the central nervous system of the body. And she was hospitalized for 97 days. As a parent for somebody who's a child who's in the hospital, especially an extended stay, there's an extreme feeling of helplessness. I mean, you can't do anything other than you've brought them to the hospital. You've done your bit. Now you're trusting in people who are much smarter than you about things that you don't understand to help you and to save your child. And that's an extreme feeling of helplessness. She was in the hospital 97 days, in the ICU for 33 of those days. She was paralyzed from the neck down, had a breathing tube, a feeding tube. She had to have emergency lung surgery. She now, although she's much better now, she still only has about 1.25 functioning lungs. There's a lot of reasons for concern for her moving forward. But I watched my child almost die twice. And that was a very emotional and mentally destroying thing to know that there was nothing I could do. So when we came out of the hospital, my head was very much, I like to use the expression, a bag of cats, a bag of wet cats. Very unhappy, very frustrated, very with a heightened sense of PTSD because we'd gone through all this emotional and mental trauma, and not having an outlet for it, because for 97 days, my wife and I didn't talk about us, and we didn't talk about how we were going to deal with the situation. It was, we used the moniker, we're going to focus on moving forward. And we said that all throughout my heart procedure era and everything that was going on. Well, we can't do anything about that. So we're just going to focus on moving forward. And so that was the mantra that kind of got us through her hospital stay. But when we came out, it was hard to visualize moving forward. It was hard to figure out what the next step was, because in the hospital each day we had a schedule. This is what we were going to do. At 9 a.m., she was going to do this, 10 a.m. These were the things that we were going to do to move forward, to make her better. And when we got home, it was, we're going to have breakfast eventually. There was not that same schedule. There was not that same sense of being and belonging and needing to do these things. And it was hard to wrap my head around that. And then on top of that, I had one night, and one of the times when we almost lost her, I saw it as a nightmare every night for about 6 weeks straight. I had the same reoccurring nightmare. I couldn't sleep. I was a shell of myself. I was already on anti-anxiety medicines, but I had to go to the doctor, and I went to the doctor and I said, okay, can we dial these up a little bit? I don't think they're popping these things like candy. I don't really think they're working. And that was the first little quasi attempt at trying to reach out for something. But, because even he suggested, you think you need somebody to talk? No, I'm fine. Just, dial up the meds. I'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not wrong in our social norms. As a man, we don't see it as wrong to go to the doctor per se. If you got something wrong, go to the doctor, get it fixed. Like taking your car to the mechanic, you get it fixed, you move along, everything's fine. But when we start talking about mental health, we can't make that same analogy for some reason. And I couldn't make that same analogy in my own head. I just couldn't see why I would ever go talk to somebody. Now, a lot of that is I envisioned in my own head that I was going to have to lay down on the couch, and hug a pillow and tell them why I didn't get the right bike when I was 13, and, and all these different things. And it was very much not that type of conversation. In fact, my daughter's rehabilitative doctor is the one who, he pulled me aside after one of her visits, and he said, are you going to counseling? And, I tried playing it off like the big man on campus that I was trying to pretend that I was. Why would I go to counseling? I don't need counseling. I'm fine. Everything's fine. I don't need to go to counseling. And he very nicely, kindly, and lovingly explained to me why I needed counseling.
Mm-hmm.
He says, either you're not choosing not to see it, or life has conditioned you not to see it, but you need help. You need to go talk to somebody. Now, here's the thing. I highly respect this man. I mean, like, highly respect this man. If it weren't for him, I have no qualms saying if it weren't for him, my daughter would not be alive. He has a depth of knowledge that I wish that I could become close to understanding. So when somebody that you highly respect, and this is going to sound horribly wrong, but as another man comes to you and says, you need help, you need to go talk to somebody, it makes you, as a man, stand up and listen a little bit. Now, it's not that I wasn't listening when my wife said, do you think you want to go talk to a counselor? It wasn't that I didn't respect her, or I didn't respect her opinion, or that I don't love her or love the way that she cares for our family. I can't explain it, but it was different. Because it was somebody, I think it was because it was somebody from the outside saying, you need to go talk to somebody. You've experienced trauma. And I was like, no, I didn't. My daughter did. She was the one in the hospital. The thing that he had to help me understand, and that I've come to understand since then, is one of the things that we as men do is that we typically and routinely dismiss our own emotional needs as a weakness. And we start talking about our own emotional needs and things and having them addressed as a weakness. So going to a mental health doctor is seen as a weakness. Even talking about going to see a mental health doctor is seen as a weakness. And that becomes a very challenging hill to climb over, because, for every one person that's telling you, hey, maybe you should go get some help, it feels like that there's 10 to 20 that are saying, just suck it up, you'll be fine. Because again, that's what life has told those 10 to 20.
There's so much in here. Okay, so because you said you have dark humor, and my family does as well, and every time my son comes up with something funny and dark, he's like, it's genetics, Mom. So
Exactly.
I'm feeling you on this. I'm immediately thinking of the meme out there that has the dog sitting at the table and there's fire everywhere all around him. And he's saying, it's fine.
It's fine. It's fine.
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. And that's honestly, that's pretty much a man's perspective about life. It could be burning down around us mentally. You could be burning down around you. Like, well, it's fine. I'll make this work. I can pull it out. I can make this happen.
I was reflecting on what might be the difference in the conversations that we have and even in the medical industry, but it was so important to get your perspective, directly from the source. And one of the things that I spotted that I suspect is part of it is whenever we're having these conversations, surrounding mental health, it seems like there's this general overarching thing in society of wanting to talk to those who are vulnerable. And for whatever reason, we're passing off this idea that men aren't vulnerable or maybe aren't supposed to be vulnerable. I feel like there's something in there. What do you think?
No, I think that's absolutely true. If you think about it, you go just a couple generations back, there was a saying, well, men were men. It meant that men weren't vulnerable. It meant that they didn't show their emotions. It meant that they didn't feel the need to connect with the people, places, things around them that meant something that mattered to them. And if you did do those things, you were considered to be a little bit less than a man. I mean, that's only a couple generations back. You think about even like the era around World War II and forward. Those men at that time coming back from war weren't able to talk about the horrors that they had seen because it wasn't the manly thing to do. When people came back from Vietnam, it wasn't the manly thing to do to talk about the things that they had seen or the wars that they had participated in, the loss of life that they had seen firsthand. None of those things are natural for a human to see, but they were expected just to deal with it and to move on. Yeah, it's totally a thing that where we look at men and go as a society and we say, well, yeah, he's a guy, so he should be able to move forward. We expect men to be able to just suck it up, move forward, and carry on because that's what life has taught the majority of people around us to do.
For some reason, I was thinking of one of my favorite miniseries, Band of Brothers, and I was so grateful that that was created. I'm biased because I think it's an incredible production, and we've watched it as a family, and it's allowed us to have these conversations and talk about, with my family, like what it must have been like for these men coming back, and for them to also express some of it within their interviews in the series. And actually have the conversation and say, what kind of effect must that have on how you live and interact when you come back from that? And, I grew up with a dad who fought in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we had enough conversation around it. You're absolutely right. There was this idea of pushing it to the side. And I think in general in society, we're like, yeah, let's just push that to the side. And that is how we stuff down our feelings and then stuff down food after our feelings or drink alcohol or have whatever
Mm-hmm.
maladaptive coping skills or mechanisms, if you will, that we have come from that pushing it aside and stuffing it down. So again, that's why I really wanted this conversation. But what do you see as a way that we can shift this?
Well, doing what we're doing right now. Like anything else, when you have something that goes against the social norms, the social constructs that we see around us, when it's something that's healthy, when it's something that's good for the population, the more that you can talk about it, the more it becomes acceptable, the more it becomes normal, the more it's going to have the stigma from it removed. There's another show that I really enjoy. It's called Ending the Stigma. I know that the hosts of that show really rather well, and they've had me on once or twice to talk about different things. But one of the biggest things that they highlight on that show is the importance of conversation. And it's absolutely true. We're talking about people overcoming alcohol and drug addiction, or the need to move past mental health issues and acknowledgement of mental health issues. How do we do that? Well, we do it by conversation, by making people feel accepted and welcomed in the conversation, not being gate kept and locked outside. So, you have this whole generation of men who feel that they're on the outside looking in, and so we accept them. We move them inside the gate by having the conversations, by opening that door and saying, here's where the conversation is. This is what we want to talk about. And to break it down, and I don't want to trivialize it, but we don't want to make it seem like it's a Mr. Rogers and here where this is a safe space. Although sometimes that's what it takes. And if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. But I can't stress it enough, just the importance of conversation, of normalizing it. The more we normalize something, the more we have an opportunity to start chipping away that stigma, because the stigma is what's going to keep people away. The stigma of feeling that they're a lesser version of themselves for seeking and asking for help is what we have to change.
Absolutely. Because you are worthy just as you are, and you are worthy to be here and to receive help and support. And I think the more that we express that, the more we're able to find the solutions too. That it keeps our minds open.
Yeah.
And also too, I mean, this gets into all sorts of elements of even this idea, because we struggle, all genders, with this idea of asking for help. Well, I should be able to handle this. The shoulds, right? I'm a perfectly smart, capable, strong individual. Yes, you are. But, and this goes back to special shout out to Mallory Jackson in our episode on trauma and living a trauma informed life, and understanding that we all experience trauma. One of the things that you said that was so profound in a reflection of how we even perceive trauma was that your first instinct was to say, no, my daughter had the trauma, not me.
Right. We deflect.
Right. And oh my word, I mean, you're her dad. You said your family is your world. To not realize, oh, yeah, there's a lot of trauma on me as well. And that needs to be dealt with. I did this as a caregiver for my mom. I went to a support group, thankfully. So that did help a good deal. But I kept thinking, someone else has it worse. Someone else has it worse, you know? And it didn't occur to me until much later. I did not want to take on that title of PTSD,
Mhm.
because I felt like that's reserved for people who went through war or went through something much worse.
Exactly. And we defer that every single time. And it's funny, you said that, well, somebody else had it worse. When my daughter was in the hospital, we saw lots of families where people had it worse than what we did. We were able to say, "Whew, man, they have it so much," and we thought that that made us feel better. But what it actually does is it deflects the pain, it deflects the emotion, it deflects the acknowledgement of the situation that you're in. Yes, you can use it as a coping mechanism and as a way to find the silver lining in the issue that you're dealing with, but it's only if you're genuinely using that to say that, yes, somebody else has it worse, and here's how I can move forward with my situation. If you're using it for that purpose, then that's fine. But it also becomes a very tricky thing when you start saying, well, they got it worse than I do. I'll be okay. There's the deflection. And that's what we were doing when we were in the hospital. It's like, oh man, we could have had it so much worse. Yeah, we'll be okay. We got a light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully it's not a train. We don't think so. But just learning the difference between the acceptance and acknowledgement of what you're dealing with and what a deflection and technique is a very important step in anything that you're doing.
Yeah, this is such a good distinction of the deflection where it becomes potentially toxic for you versus this idea of having perspective. When you have perspective on something, that can be a technique that can help you get into gratitude. You know, we're grateful for this one small success, this one small moment. We're grateful for another day. You can be devastated and grateful at the same time. And it is a beautiful way to heal. But you're absolutely right. Going a little too far with the, well, okay, I have such perspective that they have it so much worse and I should be fine. And again, I put the
Right.
should in there for a reason, right? Because we're always
Right.
shoulding on ourselves. And it's that idea that we we don't get to. Tim's going to need a moment.
Oh, I love that word. Okay. I'm writing that down.
You're taking that with you today.
Yes, I am packing that up in my pocket.
Yeah,
I love that.
enjoy. So given that, it's like, it's that both and. It's that they have it worse. So I do have this perspective and I'm grateful for where I am and being able to make it through. And I am also hurting and I need to acknowledge that.
It's interesting. One of the conversations I had with my counselor, one of the things I kept throwing out there, I was like, I'm like, hey, we fought really hard to find the silver lining, and I was holding on to that aspect of, I'm like, we found the silver lining and everything, and I was trying to pat myself on the back for what things we had done, and by golly, look at us, we're handling this. You can't see me, but I'm doing the by golly arm. Yay, we did this. But the thing is that as she helped me understand that it's great that you can find the silver lining in things. Finding the silver lining is absolutely essential. It's important to where if you get, handed a crap sandwich by life, trying to figure out how to pick it up and negotiate it is important. And you find the silver lining that, hey, I can grab this edge, I can grab this edge, I can move forward. But sometimes when we're doing that, as we try to search for the silver lining, we're not really trying to find a silver lining. We're trying to find a way for us to be able to deflect and navigate the pain. We're trying to find a way to make it seem less than what it is. And we do that by trying to, well, I found the silver lining, so this is going to be okay. And this is where the awesome saying that you just brought into my life, we should ourselves. God, I love that. That's when all that starts to really take effect, because when her and I were talking about it, I would say, well, this happened, but yeah, we did this, but okay, so you found this, and that's where the gratitude angle comes in. What about that thing that you found made you appreciate it? And sometimes trying to analyze the things that you've gone through and break them down into their component parts so that you can say, well, I realize that this added to my mental health because of this or this, is sometimes kind of tricky because, again, even though now you've submitted to the fact that and I do use the word submit, because as a man, you have to allow yourself to get to a point and you submit yourself to this, because, submission is always seen as a negative thing, by the way. And I just want to address this real quick. Submission in our life is seen as a negative thing. If you're submissive to something, or you've submitted yourself to something, people automatically see that as a weakness and that you're not having enough internal strength to take care of yourself or move forward for yourself. When really that's not the case. If you can submit to something and allow that to take control and do things for you, that's an inner strength where you can say, I need this outside influence to act upon me, to help me, to direct me, to guide me. And you submit to the direction they provide. That's a strength on your behalf, because you're allowing someone else, something else, to help you navigate these troubled waters that you're already in. That's one of the first things that as a man you have to acknowledge, is that I have to be willing to submit. And, most men become very manly at that point. And, well, I'm a man and I'm not going to submit to anybody, and nobody's going to tell me what to do. And you have to get past that. The thing is that there's no magic potion, spell, pill that's going to help you get to the point where you accept the fact that somebody else needs to be able to have impact and direction in your life. But once you get there, because of the level of things that you've gone through in your life, once you get there, it becomes a very calming place. For me, it was very interesting to go from, and I'm not saying that I'm cured and that I have no anxiety, because that would be one of the biggest lies I would be telling your audience right now. I still have anxiety. I'm still medicated. And although I'm not actively in counseling right now, I do see the need for it. And actually, I was just talking to my wife about the importance of, maybe it's time for a checkup. Maybe I need to go back, and kind of refill the tanks a little bit. And again, that goes back to being partly looking at it from an angle of submission, submitting myself to this so that I can better myself for my family. And if that's what gets you in the door, then I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this for my family. Please let it get you in the door. Mm-hmm. Because there's so many things on the other side that, as you start finding those silver linings to all the things that you've gone through, and there are some things in life where you're not going to find a silver lining. There are some traumas that you've gone through where you can't say, "Oh man, I'm really glad that happened. Here's what I learned from that." That's not a blanket statement that covers everything. It can't. But there are many things in life that you've gone through where you're able to look back and you can find the silver lining of what you learned, how that emboldened you to be able to move forward, how that strengthened you to be able to move forward. When you have those and you found those silver linings and you found the way that it has strengthened you emotionally, mentally, sometimes spiritually, you look at that and you become grateful. And that's where the attitude of gratitude comes in, and finding that gratitude statement for these things, which sounds at the beginning of things, sounds like a very odd thing. Well, I'm grateful that this happened because, and that's a hard thing to wrap your mind around, because there is not an ice cube's chance in hell that I'm glad that my daughter went through these things. I am grateful for some of the life lessons that we learned from it. And so being able to make that distinction is huge. It's mind blowing when you're able to sit back and look at it and go, okay, so I've gone through all these things. I'm finally able to submit to a course of action that's going to help me to become positive in my life and be able to be a productive member of my family, of society again, and being able to move forward. And so here's how I can be grateful. If you're able to do that, it's an amazing place to get to. But like anything else, you take your car to the mechanic every now and then to get a tune up, to make it run better. You got to change the oil. You got to do all these little things, it's the same with our brains. Every once in a while, we have to have somebody that we can talk to, whether, clinical or unclinical, that we can talk to, that we can share this level of emotion with, whether you're a man or a woman. It's a must to be able to have these things, because if you keep holding all these things in, I guarantee you, somewhere, some way, somehow, and usually at a point where you will not want them to, your backpack is only going to carry so many things. And then as you try to cram that extra piece of trauma in there, the bottom's going to rip and all is going to come spilling out. And you're not going to be able to control it. You're not going to be able to hold it back. So I'll just make this plea. If you've considered counseling at any point and said no, please reconsider. If you have gone through some level of trauma, and even if you don't think it was necessarily really trauma because somebody else had it worse, or it could have been so much worse, or all these things, please go seek help. The thing is that you may not find the right counselor on the first try. And having a counselor is like having a friend. It has to be somebody you connect with. It has to be somebody that you're comfortable with. So that as I'm sitting there and I'm talking to my counselor, I have to have a sense of comfort and trust in that person to know that the things that I'm telling them are A, appreciated, and B, that they're between us. And so if you don't have that level of trust, it can be hard to do. And so it might take you a time or two. You might go through 2 or 3 counselors before you find the right one. And like I said, I compared it to having a friend. And that's the analogy I make quite often, is that, sometimes in life, and now for some people, they got lucky, and the people that they hung out with as kids are still their friends now and their older age. Some of us, though, we've had to upgrade the friend route a couple different times, and we've had to pick different friends because of choices that they made in life, or even choices that we've made in life. And those things are our ways parted, and things along those lines. So it's not uncommon for us when we talk about our friends that, oh, well, these are friends that I became friends with at this point, friends that I became friends with at this point, or I stopped being friends with this person and became friends with this person. Look at your counselor the same way. I'm not saying that you guys need to go out and have a steak dinner and, share a couple beverages together, but I am saying that you need to be able to be friendly with that person. You need to be able to have a conversation with them where you feel that there's a beneficial quotient to the relationship, not just you sitting there and paying them to listen to you for an hour. There's more to it than that. So I always try to tell people it's not exactly like a friendship, but that's the closest analogy that I can ever think of, type of person that you want to try and find for the counselor that you settle on, that this is the person I'm going to talk with. This is the person I'm going to share my emotions and my trauma with.
Right. And I think that's an important distinction. And I think overall, our conversation here today is encouraging you to have conversations, to start talking. That's the action we can take today, is to have these conversations, to share this conversation, to talk about what we talked about, and then take those steps. Have one conversation and the next and the next. The first can be with a friend, and it can be with a loved one, and then it can be with someone who is a professional.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just keep having those conversations. I think that's a beautiful place for us to wrap up.
Yeah, excellent.
Listening back, I continue to be so grateful to Tim for his honesty and openness in sharing his story and perspective. His words remind us how vital it is to keep those conversations going, not just for men, but for all of us who love and support them. A quick note that since our original recording, some of Tim's links and projects may have changed, but you can still find him online nerding out on his pop culture podcast, which I will link to in the show notes, and continuing to be an incredible advocate for love, kindness, and mental health. If today's episode brought something up for you and you'd like to explore resources, I encourage you to check the interview and show notes for episode 29 with Mallory Jackson, who at the time was an assistant professor for human services and chemical dependency counseling. We discuss trauma and emotional healing, and Mallory offers an incredible perspective on living a trauma-informed life and recommends a number of books. As a reminder, any of the books recommended on the podcast you will be able to find through a link on the resources page of the positivelyproductive.com website. positivelyproductive.com/resources. Scroll down to the podcast resources link, click there, and you will go right to Amazon and find all of the books mentioned. For additional mental health resources and support, I also encourage you to visit samhsa.gov for free and confidential support available 24/7. As a trauma and grief-informed coach, I want to emphasize that while my work focuses on productivity and life systems, those are done in the context of our full lives, struggles and all. Many of my clients also work with their therapists while working with me, and that combination can be incredibly powerful. Healing and growth aren't either or, they're both and. Thanks for listening today, for sharing, and for helping me keep this conversation alive. If you know someone who needs to hear this episode, or you think the people in your life that you love should all hear this episode, I'd be so grateful if you would share it. Thank you for listening and for helping me keep this conversation alive. Because when we make space for men's mental health, we make space for everyone's healing. Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you have feedback or questions, you can find me through the Connect page of the positivelyproductive.com website. And if you're looking for any of the resources mentioned here, from books to products to training and more, go to positivelyproductive.com/resources.